Right there, under the tall ceilings of the historic hall, surrounded by the watchful eyes of Chicago's elite, Dominic Romano leaned down and kissed her. It was a kiss that echoed the very first one at the lounge. Commanding, consuming, deeply possessive. But this time, Clarissa was not running away. She wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him back with all the fierce, unapologetic confidence she had finally learned to embrace. She had been dared to kiss a stranger. In the end, she had become his queen. The gala carried on around them, glasses clinking, soft music playing, but for a long moment neither of them noticed any of it. When they finally pulled apart, Dominic kept his hand firmly on her waist, as if letting go was simply not an option anymore. "They are all watching us," Clarissa murmured, glancing at the crowd of senators, judges, and old money families who had gone quiet at the sight of the kiss. "Let them watch," Dominic said simply. "I want every person in this room to understand exactly who you are to me." Clarissa felt a thrill run through her, sharper than any fear she had carried these past weeks. She had spent her whole life being underestimated, first by men who could not see past her size, then by a friend who used her insecurities as entertainment, then by a boss who had traded her safety for his own debts. Standing here now, in an emerald gown, on the arm of the most powerful man in the city, she felt something she had never felt before. Seen, truly seen, not despite who she was, but because of it. Agent Kavanaugh watched from across the room, his jaw tight, his hands clenched at his sides. He knew he had lost this round. The FBI's case had crumbled the moment Clarissa rebuilt the books into an unbreakable fortress of legitimate paperwork. He turned and walked toward the exit, disappearing into the night, defeated for now. Dominic noticed him leave. A faint, satisfied smile crossed his face. "He won't stop," he said quietly to Clarissa. "Men like him never do. But he also won't touch you. Not anymore." "I'm not afraid of him," Clarissa said, and she meant it. "I know," Dominic replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That's exactly why I need you beside me. Not behind me, beside me." Later that night, they left the gala together, stepping out into the cool air along the lakefront. The city lights reflected off the dark water, and for the first time in weeks, Clarissa felt no rush, no deadline, no fear pressing on her chest. She simply walked beside Dominic, her hand resting naturally in his. "Tell me something," she said as they walked. "Why me? You could have anyone in this city. Powerful women, beautiful women, women who already understand your world." Dominic considered the question seriously, which surprised her. He was not a man who answered things carelessly. "I have met plenty of women who understood my world," he said. "They understood the money, the danger, the power. But they were drawn to what I have, not who I am. You walked up to me knowing nothing about my world, and you were terrified. You told me so yourself. And still, you did not shrink. You did not flatter me. You challenged me, from the very first moment, without even trying to." "That was mostly stubbornness," Clarissa admitted, a small laugh escaping her. "And a very cruel friend." "Whatever it was," Dominic said, stopping to face her fully, "it showed me something I had stopped believing existed. Someone who would stand her ground in front of me, not because she wanted something from me, but because she refused to be small for anyone." Clarissa's chest tightened with an emotion she did not have a name for yet. It was not simple attraction anymore. It had grown into something steadier, something that felt disturbingly close to trust. "This is dangerous," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "All of it. You, me, this life." "Yes," Dominic agreed, without hesitation or apology. "It is dangerous. I will not lie to you about that. But I will also never let anything in this world touch you without going through me first." It was not a romantic promise wrapped in soft words. It was a simple, blunt statement of fact, delivered the same way he delivered every threat, every deal, every command. And somehow, that honesty meant more to Clarissa than any gentle promise ever could have. They reached his car, parked at the curb with Dominic's driver waiting patiently. Before getting in, Clarissa turned back to look at the glowing windows of the gala behind them. The world of polished lies and careful smiles she used to believe was the safest place to hide. She did not belong to that world anymore. She belonged to something far more honest in its danger, and far more real in its devotion. Part 1. When the most feared man in New York's underworld needed a fake wife to close a billion-dollar deal, he expected a quiet, obedient model. Instead, he got Clara, a bold, confident, plus-size woman who did not just play the part. She rewrote the entire script. Dominic Moretti did not ask for favors. He demanded results. As the undisputed head of the Moretti crime family, his life was a carefully built empire of loyalty, fear, and enormous wealth. He wore expensive tailored suits that hid the brutal truth of his real business, and he controlled a network that stretched from Wall Street to the shipping ports of New Jersey. But as he stood in the huge glass-walled living room of his Tribeca apartment, staring down at the rain-soaked streets of Manhattan, Dominic faced a problem that money and threats could not easily fix. Vincenzo Costa was arriving from Sicily in exactly 48 hours. Costa was a man from the old world, a traditionalist who controlled the most valuable supply routes in Europe. He refused to do business with unmarried men he saw as unstable and unpredictable. To Costa, a man without a wife was a man without a future. To secure the huge shipping contract that would make the Moretti family's business look completely legal for the next century, Dominic needed to look like a devoted, grounded family man. He needed a wife, not a girlfriend, not a hired date. He needed a strong, elegant woman who could convince a suspicious old Sicilian boss that Dominic was building a lasting family. Leo, Dominic's right-hand man, was sweating through his expensive shirt. For 3 days, Leo had brought a parade of women through the apartment. Actresses, socialites, models. All beautiful, all fragile. They either flirted too much, completely unaware of the danger they were in, or they trembled the moment Dominic entered the room, their eyes darting nervously to the armed guards by the door. The last woman, a tall blonde named Sophia, had just run out of the apartment in tears. She had torn her dress on a sharp glass table, and when Dominic looked at her with cold impatience, she had burst into tears and quit completely. "She's gone, boss," Leo muttered, rubbing his face. "I can make more calls. I know a girl in Soho." "No more girls, Leo," Dominic snapped, his voice a low, rough sound that made the air feel heavy. "Costa isn't a fool. He'll see right through some nervous 22-year-old whose only goal in life is a shopping allowance. I need a woman with real presence, a woman who looks like she could run this family if I got shot tomorrow." The heavy doors of the apartment swung open, breaking the tense silence. "Well, you owe me $400 for the emergency call-out, and since your runaway bride is currently crying in the elevator, I'm guessing the fitting is canceled." Dominic turned slowly, standing in the entrance, shaking a wet, flower-patterned umbrella onto his clean marble floor, was a woman who completely did not fit into his carefully controlled world. Clara Higgins was Leo's cousin, a highly respected wardrobe manager who ran the backstage chaos of Broadway's biggest shows. She was also, undeniably and without apology, a bigger woman. She did not try to hide her size behind dark, shapeless clothes. Instead, she filled a room in a bright, oversized vintage coat in a bold mustard yellow. Her dark, curly hair was pinned up in a messy but deliberate twist, and her full lips were pressed into a tight line of pure annoyance. She carried a heavy leather sewing kit that looked like it had survived a war. "Clara," Leo hissed, his eyes darting nervously toward his boss. "You can't just walk in here." I buzzed. "Your security let me up because they know I'm the only one who can fix a torn silk hem in under 20 minutes. Clara fired back, not even looking at Leo. Her sharp eyes locked directly onto Dominic. She did not flinch. She did not tremble. She looked at the city's most dangerous man the same way she looked at a badly behaved actor. "I don't care who you are or what kind of intimidation business you're running here. My time is valuable." Dominic stepped forward, intrigued. He was a large man, built like a fighter, and he was used to people physically shrinking away from him. Clara stood her ground. Her curves were planted firmly, her chin tilted up in defiance. There was an undeniable warmth and strength radiating from her, a grounding presence that instantly pulled the panic out of the room. "You're Leo's cousin," Dominic stated, his dark eyes studying her. "And you're the man who makes grown women cry over a ripped hem." Clara countered smoothly. She unbuttoned her coat, revealing a tailored emerald green dress that fit her full figure beautifully. She moved with a grace that had nothing to do with the heavy tension in the room. Since there's no dress to fix, I'll be taking my fee and leaving. Cash preferred. Dominic did not reach for his wallet. Instead, a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. He walked closer to her, entering her personal space. He smelled of expensive cigars, rain, and danger. Clara simply raised an eyebrow, refusing to step back. "Are you afraid of me, Clara?" Dominic asked softly. "I regularly manage 50 exhausted, dramatic actors during a fast costume change while a live orchestra plays." Clara replied dryly, crossing her arms. "You're just a man in an expensive suit with a bad attitude. So no, I'm not afraid of you." Dominic turned to Leo. "Cancel the other calls." Leo blinked, completely confused. "Boss, we still need a wife for the Costa dinner." Dominic looked back down at Clara, admiring the fierce, unshakable fire in her eyes and the complete lack of pretending in her posture. She was real. She had substance, weight, and a mind sharp enough to cut through glass. Costa wanted a formidable woman, Dominic said, his gaze never leaving Clara. He was looking at one. "We don't need to make any more calls. We already found her." Clara stared at the heavy check sitting on the glass coffee table. The number written in Dominic's sharp handwriting was enough to buy a house outright. $2 million, Clara said slowly, her voice steady despite the nerves running through her. She sat across from Dominic on a low velvet sofa, her heavy leather sewing kit resting by her feet. "Tax-free. Transferred to an offshore account of your choosing the morning after Vincenzo Costa signs the contract," Dominic confirmed. He leaned back in his leather chair, swirling a glass of whiskey. He watched her closely, studying the way she processed the number. "And for this, I have to pretend to be deeply in love with a man who likely has bodies buried in New Jersey. I smile at a Sicilian mafia boss over dinner and convince him you're a trustworthy family man." Clara picked up the check, folding it precisely in half. "It's not enough." Leo, standing by the door, choked on his own breath. "Clara, are you out of your mind? That's $2 million. "I heard the number, Leo," Clara interrupted sharply. She looked at Dominic, her dark eyes completely serious. "If Costa is as smart and suspicious as you say, he will run a background check. He will see I am not a runway model. He will see I am a working-class theater designer from Queens. You need a story that makes sense. We can't just say we met at some charity event." "What do you suggest?" Dominic asked, genuinely fascinated. Nobody negotiated with him. Nobody pushed back. "We met 8 years ago," Clara lied smoothly, leaning forward. "You bumped into me outside a bakery in Little Italy. We argued. You liked that I yelled at you. We dated in secret because your world was too dangerous, but you never let me go. We reconnected 6 months ago, and you finally realized you couldn't live without me. It explains why I'm not some polished mob wife. It explains why I'm different." Dominic's lips twitched into a real smile. "You're a very good liar, Clara." "I work in theater," she replied smoothly. "Now to the terms. I get full creative control over my wardrobe and styling. I will not have your people trying to squeeze me into something that cuts off my circulation. And I will not be told to wear black because it's slimming. If I'm playing the wife of Dominic Moretti, I am going to take up space." "Agreed," Dominic said, setting his glass down. He liked the way she spoke. He liked her demand for respect. "What else?" "I want a guarantee in writing that once this dinner is over and Costa is gone, I walk away. No strings. No connection to your business. I don't want to look over my shoulder for the rest of my life." Dominic held her gaze for a long moment. The vulnerability hidden beneath her confidence was faint, but he saw it. "You have my word. And in my world, my word is far more binding than a piece of paper." The next 24 hours were controlled chaos. Dominic had first called in a team of expensive personal stylists, but the moment the lead stylist held up a dull, structured navy dress and suggested it would minimize her waist, Clara fired them all on the spot. She practically chased them out of the apartment, her voice booming off the marble floors. Instead, she called in her own connections. Within hours, her trusted colleagues from the theater district arrived with garment bags full of options. When Dominic walked into the master's suite the evening of the dinner, he stopped completely still. Clara stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror, and she looked stunning. She had chosen a custom-draped crimson silk gown from an independent designer she trusted. The dress did not hide her body. It celebrated it. The rich fabric clung beautifully to her wide hips, cinched elegantly at her waist, and featured an off-the-shoulder neckline. Her hair was swept to one side in dramatic waves, and her makeup was classic, sharp eyeliner and a deep red lip matching the dress perfectly. She did not look like a woman trying to shrink herself down to fit into a mafia boss's world. She looked like a queen who already owned it. "You look," Dominic started, his voice suddenly losing its usual cold edge. "Don't sound so surprised, Dominic," Clara said, turning to face him. "I told you, if we're doing this, we do it my way." Dominic slowly closed the distance between them. He wore a black tuxedo that made him look like a shadow cast by a dangerous fire. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Hold out your hand," he murmured, standing close enough that she could feel the heat from his chest. Clara extended her hand. Dominic opened the box to reveal a massive, flawless diamond ring. It was heavy, bold, and beautiful. Gently, his rough hands took hers. The contrast between his rough, worn skin and her soft, warm hand made her breath catch in her throat. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "I had Leo raid the vault," Dominic said quietly, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. He did not let go of her hand right away. He looked down at her, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "Tonight, you answer to no one but me. And if Costa or any of his men look at you with anything less than complete respect, I will make them regret it. Understood?" Clara felt a shiver race down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. "Understood." "Good," Dominic whispered, offering her his arm. "Let's go steal $1 billion. Clara looped her arm through his, feeling the solid muscle beneath his tuxedo jacket. As they walked out of the apartment toward the waiting armored car, Clara realized one terrifying truth. Playing the part of Dominic Moretti's wife was going to be dangerously easy. The armored car glided through the rain-swept streets of Manhattan, pulling to a silent stop outside the unmarked entrance of a private dining club. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of truffles, aged vinegar, and the heavy unspoken tension of pure power. Dominic stepped out first, the rain slicking his dark hair as he turned to offer Clara his hand. When she emerged, the crimson silk of her gown standing out sharply against the damp gray night, the murmurs of the valets and security guards fell instantly silent. Clara did not rush. She stepped onto the pavement with the deliberate, grounded poise of a woman who knew her exact worth. She linked her arm through Dominic's, feeling the tension in his bicep. "Breathe, Dominic," Clara murmured, her voice barely carrying over the rain. "If you walk in there looking like you're heading to an execution, Costa will smell trouble immediately. We're in love, remember? We're celebrating." Dominic looked down at her, his dark eyes widening slightly. He was the boss of the Moretti family. No one told him to breathe, yet the steady, warm weight of her hand against his side worked like an anchor. He let out a slow breath, his shoulders dropping a fraction. "You are far too calm for a woman walking into a room full of loaded guns." "I survived a rehearsal of a Broadway musical with a director who threw folding chairs," Clara replied, flashing a brilliant, unbothered smile. "Mobsters are just theater people with better tailoring and worse tempers." They entered the underground private dining room. Vincenzo Costa sat at the head of a long, heavy table, surrounded by 4 men whose suits bulged slightly at the ribs. Costa was in his late 60s, a sharp-faced Sicilian with cold eyes that had seen decades of betrayal and violence. Next to him sat his nephew, Lorenzo, a slick, arrogant underboss with a taste for flashy watches and cruel jokes. When Dominic and Clara approached, Costa did not immediately stand. His eyes locked onto Clara, studying her with a ruthlessness that would have broken a weaker woman. He took in her curves, the boldness of the red dress, and the massive diamond catching the candlelight. He was looking for a crack, a tremor, a sign of a terrified escort. Clara gave him none. Instead of waiting for Dominic to introduce her, she stepped forward, extending her hand with warm confidence. "Don Costa," Clara said, her voice rich and carrying perfectly through the quiet room. Dominic has told me so much about your legendary work in Palermo. It is an absolute honor." Costa blinked, surprised by her boldness. He slowly stood, taking her hand and brushing a dry kiss over her knuckles. "Signora Moretti, I must confess I did not expect Dominic to find a woman of such formidable presence." Lorenzo, the nephew, snickered under his breath. Yes, Dominic always did have a large appetite. Seems he indulges it at home now, too. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. Dominic's hand twitched toward the inside of his jacket, fury flashing across his face. But before he could say a word, Clara laughed. It was a rich, genuine sound that echoed off the brick walls. "Oh, Lorenzo, isn't it?" Clara said, turning her sharp gaze to the younger man. She looked him up and down, her eyes pausing on his overly tight, shiny jacket. "It's true. My husband loves a woman with substance. He prefers a feast, while it seems you," she gestured gracefully toward a slight frame, "are accustomed to surviving on scraps. Perhaps that's why your jacket is pulling at the seams. A good tailor knows you need extra room in the shoulders to project authority, rather than hoping shiny fabric will do the work for you." Silence slammed into the room. Dominic froze. Costa's guard shifted nervously. Then Costa threw his head back and let out a booming, delighted laugh. He slammed his hand on the table. "A lioness. Dominic, you brought a lioness to my table. She has the eyes of a hawk and the tongue of a viper." Costa glared at his nephew, who was turning a furious shade of red. "Sit down, Lorenzo, and shut your mouth. The signora just taught you a lesson." The dinner that followed was a masterclass in psychological control, and Clara conducted it perfectly. She did not simply sit there looking pretty. She steered the conversation. When Costa tried to test Dominic by dropping rapid Sicilian dialect about shipping logistics, Clara seamlessly stepped in. "My apologies, Don Costa." She lied smoothly, sipping her wine. "But when Dominic and I stayed in Catania last summer, the harbor workers there complained of the exact same union delays. Dominic handled it by restructuring the night shifts. Isn't that right, darling?" She placed a warm hand over Dominic's. Catching her lie perfectly, Dominic leaned into it. "Exactly. It cut our overhead by 15%. The docks in Palermo could benefit from the same structure." Costa leaned forward, completely captivated. For 2 hours, Clara ate heartily, drank deeply, and laughed genuinely. She told fabricated stories about how she and Dominic argued over Sunday dinner recipes, painting the picture of a grounded, passionate partnership. She did not hide her appetite, enjoying the rich food fully, proving she was entirely comfortable in her own skin and in this dangerous world. By the time coffee was served, Costa was looking at Dominic not as a young, unstable boss, but as a seasoned leader anchored by a brilliant, powerful wife. The billion-dollar contract sitting in a leather folio on a side table now seemed like a mere formality. "You are a lucky man, Dominic," Costa said softly, swirling his drink. "A man with a wife like this is a man who builds empires. I am ready to sign." Dominic looked at Clara. The pride swelling in his chest was foreign, heavy, and intensely real. She had not just played the part. She had completely conquered the room. But as the waiter stepped forward to clear the final plates, Clara's theatrical training kicked in, and the evening took a dangerous turn. In the theater, a wardrobe manager survives by noticing details everyone else misses. Clara's brain was trained to spot a fraying hem from 50 feet away, or the wrong pair of shoes on an actor seconds before the curtain rose. As the waiter approached the head of the table, carrying a silver tray with Costa's final drink and a heavy box of cigars, Clara's eyes locked onto his hands. His grip was wrong. A trained server at a place like this balances a tray on the fingertips of one hand, keeping the other behind his back. This man gripped the edges of the tray with white-knuckled tension. Worse, Clara's gaze drifted to his uniform. The vest was standard, but the trousers were heavy tactical fabric, not the lightweight material worn by the rest of the staff. And peeking out from beneath his polished shoe was a thick rubber sole made for silent movement, not sliding across a dining room floor. The man was not a waiter. As he stepped behind Costa's chair, his right hand slipped away from the tray, sliding smoothly beneath his vest toward his waistband. Clara did not think. There was no time to scream. No time to warn Dominic in a room where one wrong word meant a bloodbath. Relying purely on the weight of her body and the element of surprise, Clara stood up violently. "Oh my God, a rat!" Clara shrieked at the top of her lungs, pointing at the floor directly behind the fake waiter. In the same motion, she hooked her foot around the leg of her heavy dining chair and shoved it backward with all her strength. The chair slammed directly into the knees of the assassin just as he drew a silenced pistol from his belt. He buckled, and his shot went wild, shattering the crystal chandelier above the table, raining glass down onto the plates. Chaos erupted. Clara grabbed the edge of the heavy table and threw her weight backward, dragging the tablecloth, the fine china, the wine glasses, and the heavy silver centerpieces directly into the assassin's path, burying him under a cascade of debris and scalding coffee. "Gun!" Dominic roared, his instincts taking over instantly. He lunged over the table, tackling Clara to the floor, shielding her body with his own. In a fraction of a second, the room became a war zone. Costa's guards drew their weapons, but Leo and Dominic's men were faster. 2 deafening shots rang out, followed by the heavy thud of the fake waiter hitting the floor, neutralized. Silence snapped back into the room, broken only by settling glass and the ragged breathing of the men. Dominic was hovering over Clara, his hands frantically checking her face, her shoulders, the crimson silk of her dress. His heart was hammering against his ribs. The cold, calculated Mafia Boss had completely shattered, replaced by raw panic. "Clara," he breathed, his voice cracking. "Clara, are you hit? Talk to me." Clara blinked up at him, her chest heaving. Her elegant updo had collapsed, dark curls framing her face, and her dress was splashed with spilled wine. But her eyes were clear and sharp. I'm fine, Dominic." "He's down." Slowly, Dominic helped her to her feet, keeping a protective arm tightly around her waist. He refused to let her go. Across the room, Vincenzo Costa stared at the dead man on the floor, then slowly raised his eyes to Clara. The old boss brushed a piece of shattered crystal off his lapel. The assassin was a known hitman from a rival faction, a man sent to destabilize the entire East Coast by wiping out Costa and Moretti in one stroke. Costa looked at Clara, who was calmly adjusting her torn dress with the annoyed practicality of a woman inspecting a ruined costume. She saw him. Costa whispered, absolute awe in his rough voice. He stepped over the debris, ignoring his panicked nephew, and walked directly to Clara. "Before my guards, before my own eyes, your wife saw the danger." "I know a bad costume when I see one," Clara said, her voice shaking only slightly. His trousers didn't match the vest, and waiters don't wear tactical boots. Costa reached out and gripped Dominic's shoulder firmly. "I wanted proof that you were a man who could protect his investments, Dominic. You have brought me a woman who protects the protector. The rival family will pay for this. But tonight," Costa gestured to Leo, who was holding the leather folio against his chest like a shield. "Tonight we sign. I do not do business with men. I do business with families, and the Moretti family is made of iron." 30 minutes later, the billion-dollar contract was signed in a secured back office. The mess was handled quietly, swept under the rug of underworld influence. When they finally climbed back into the armored car, the adrenaline began to fade, leaving a heavy, exhausted silence behind it. Clara kicked off her ruined heels, sighing as she rubbed her aching temples. Dominic sat beside her in the dark. He was not drinking. He was not celebrating. He was staring at her with an intensity that made the air in the car feel impossibly thin. The $2 million check, the fake story, the wardrobe, it had all started as a transaction, a business deal. But as Dominic looked at the fierce, beautiful woman who had just thrown herself into danger to save his life, the transactional nature of their agreement disappeared into the night air. He reached across the seat and took her hand, his thumb tracing the heavy diamond on her finger. "The deal is done," Clara whispered, looking down at his hand holding hers. "You got your shipping routes?" "Yes," Dominic replied, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He leaned in, his lips hovering inches from hers, the scent of gunpowder and rain clinging to his skin. "But the terms of our contract just changed, Clara, because there is no force on this earth that is going to make me let you walk away." The interior of the car was as silent as a tomb, save for the rhythmic drumming of rain against the tinted, bulletproof glass. Clara stared at Dominic, the weight of his words hanging in the narrow space between them. "There's no force on this earth that is going to make me let you walk away." For a fleeting second, the practical, independent theater professional in her wanted to laugh, to remind him of the $2 million and the verbal contract they had struck just 24 hours earlier. But as she looked into Dominic's dark eyes, the humor died in her throat. The cold, calculating boss who had evaluated her like a piece of strategic real estate was gone. In his place was a man stripped down to his rawest instincts, a man who had found something precious and was preparing to fight to keep it. "A contract is a contract, Dominic," Clara said, her voice softer than she intended, though she did not pull her hand away from his grip. "You promised me a clean break. The dinner is over." Costa signed. "Costa signed because he believes you are my wife," Dominic countered, his thumb continuing its slow sweep over her knuckles, where the heavy diamond caught the streetlights flashing past the window. "And tonight, in front of the entire East Coast underworld, you threw a table at a hitman to save my life. Do you honestly think you can just go back to a wardrobe department in Queens tomorrow? You are known now, Clara." A cold spike of reality pierced through the fading adrenaline. Clara's breath hitched as the reality of her situation settled in. She was not just a fake date anymore. To rival factions, she was the woman who had humiliated an assassin and secured the Moretti family a billion-dollar empire. "So what are you saying?" Clara asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. "That I'm your prisoner?" "I am saying you are my priority," Dominic replied fiercely, leaning closer until the scent of his cologne and the faint smell of gunpowder surrounded her completely. "I will not put you in a cage, Clara, but I will not let you out of my sight until this threat is dealt with. And even then," he paused, his gaze dropping to her lips before rising to meet her eyes again, "I don't think I could let you go." The car glided into the secure underground garage. When the heavy steel doors closed behind them, shutting out the rest of the world, Dominic finally released her hand, though the absence of his touch left a strange warmth on her skin. Up in the apartment, the silence was heavy. Clara kicked off her ruined heels the moment she stepped onto the marble floor, exhaustion settling deep into her bones. She turned to head toward the guest room, desperate to peel off the restrictive, wine-stained silk. That's when she noticed the dark red stain blooming on the sleeve of Dominic's white shirt. He had removed his jacket, moving with a stiff, unnatural rigidity. "You're bleeding," Clara stated, her theatrical instincts overriding her exhaustion. In her world, an injured crew member meant the show stopped until they were patched up. Dominic glanced at his arm with mild irritation, as if a stray shard of glass was merely a nuisance. "It's just a graze from the chandelier. It's nothing." "Sit down," Clara ordered, her voice carrying the exact same authority she used to command a chaotic backstage crew. Now, Dominic blinked, genuinely surprised. Men twice his age trembled before him. Yet this remarkable woman in a ruined gown was pointing at a leather sofa as if he were a disobedient child. To his own surprise, he obeyed, sinking onto the cushions and watching in silent fascination as Clara disappeared into the bathroom, returning a moment later with a first aid kit. She stood between his knees, bringing her warmth and the soft curve of her hips right into his eye line. She did not hesitate. Her fingers unbuttoned the cuff of his ruined shirt and rolled the bloody fabric up to his shoulder, exposing a jagged gash from a flying shard of crystal. "This is going to sting," she warned, uncapping a bottle of antiseptic. "I've had worse," he murmured, but his attention was not on the wound. It was entirely on her. As Clara leaned in to clean the cut, Dominic raised his uninjured hand and gently placed it flat against the side of her waist. He did not grab. He simply rested his palm there, marveling at the soft curve of her body. For a man who lived in a world of sharp edges, Clara's warmth and solidity was the most grounding sensation he had ever experienced. "I meant what I said in the car, Clara," Dominic whispered, his voice carrying a quiet vulnerability no one in his world had ever witnessed. "I have spent my entire life building walls, acquiring power, trusting no one. Then you walked into my apartment, yelled at my men, demanded your worth, and proved you had more courage than half my men combined." He slid his hand slowly upward, feeling the frantic rhythm of her heart. "I don't want the fake story," Dominic confessed, pulling her gently by the waist. "I don't want a business arrangement. I want the reality. I want you taking up every inch of space in my life." Clara swallowed hard. "Dominic, this is insane. We live in two completely different worlds. I pin hems and organize costume racks. You run an underworld empire." "Then rule it with me," he challenged, his gaze dropping to her mouth. Before she could form a rational argument, Dominic pulled her down. His mouth met hers, not with the violence of his world, but with a desperate, consuming hunger. Clara gasped against his lips, and that was all the invitation he needed. His good arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. The kiss was deep, possessive, electric. Clara's hands tangled in his hair, giving as good as she got, completely surrendering to the terrifying thrill of the city's most dangerous man, treating her like she was the only thing that mattered. Part 6. The next morning, the reality of Clara's new life hit like a freight train. Waking in Dominic's bed, she found him gone, leaving only the scent of coffee behind. Pulling a robe around her, she checked her phone. A bank notification flashed. $2 million had cleared. She was a millionaire. She could pack her sewing kit and disappear anywhere in the world. But as she touched her lips, the memory of Dominic's hands on her waist sent a shiver down her spine. Running felt impossible. A sharp knock broke her thoughts. Leo stepped in, his face pale. "Clara, Dominic needs you in the war room. Now." She marched down the hallway barefoot, robe tied around her, her commanding presence making armed guards step back. When she pushed open the doors, Dominic leaned over a digital map of Manhattan with 4 of his men. Seeing Clara, his hard expression softened. He wrapped a protective arm around her, kissing her temple in front of everyone. The message was clear. She is mine, and she is equal. "What is happening?" Clara asked. "The rival family," Dominic growled. "We intercepted chatter. They're humiliated. A civilian stopped their hitman. They've placed a bounty on you." Clara blinked at the absurdity. "A hit on me? I'm a wardrobe manager." "They think you're a trained operative," Leo said grimly. "The way you neutralized him, they assume you're an elite contractor." Clara let out a laugh. "He wore rubber-soled tactical boots instead of dress shoes. Anyone dressing an actor could spot that mistake." She stepped toward the map, fear pulsing under her skin, but her analytical brain took over. "Dominic, how did they know we'd be there? That dinner was supposed to be private." "We're looking for the leak," one of the men said defensively. "You don't need to look at communications," Clara said, tapping the blueprint. "You need to look at the seating. Costa sat at the head. You were to his right. I was to yours. His nephew sat directly across from me." "Lorenzo is a fool, but he's Costa's blood," Dominic said. "A fool in a badly tailored suit," Clara agreed. "But think about the timing. 5 minutes before the fake waiter came in, Lorenzo excused himself. If Lorenzo had stayed in that chair, the assassin wouldn't have had a clear line of sight to Costa. He needed that chair empty." Silence fell over the room. Dominic's jaw tightened as the realization hit him. Lorenzo cleared the sideline. He set up his own uncle. Costa, a man of ruthless justice, did not hesitate once presented with the facts. By that afternoon, Lorenzo was dealt with, and the leak was closed. But the bounty on Clara remained. Later, alone in his office, Dominic wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I will tear the rival family apart piece by piece," he said. "Nobody hunts my wife." "Fake wife," Clara whispered. Dominic turned her to face him, pulling out the velvet box holding the diamond ring. "The $2 million was for the actress," he said softly. "But this ring is for the woman who saved my life. The woman who never needs to shrink herself to fit into my world because she was born to rule it." He dropped to one knee. "Keep the money. Keep your theater job if it makes you happy. Just stay with me. Marry me for real." Clara looked down at the most dangerous man in New York, offering her everything. She smiled. "Only if I get to design my own wedding dress." Dominic laughed, pulling her into a deep kiss. "Design whatever you want. The world is yours." 6 months later, The danger that had threatened to consume the underworld was nothing but a memory. Dominic had dismantled the rival syndicate with ruthless precision. Meanwhile, Clara was busy running a very different kind of operation, planning the wedding of the decade at a grand hotel ballroom, treating it exactly like a Broadway production, with herself as the director. She fired the bridal consultant who tried to put her in a restrictive corset. She rejected hydrangeas for wilting understage lighting. She had not lost a single pound in 6 months, nor had she tried to. She had moved into Dominic's world completely, bringing her chaotic, brilliant energy into his controlled one. On the day of the wedding, Vincenzo Costa sat in the front row, having flown in from Sicily to witness the union of the man he trusted and the woman who had saved his life. At the altar, Dominic stood in a midnight blue tuxedo, visibly nervous for the first time in his adult life. When the doors opened, Clara did not simply walk down the aisle. She commanded it. She wore a gown she had designed herself, ivory satin with an off-the-shoulder neckline, cinched at her waist before flowing into a dramatic skirt embroidered with gold thread. A sheer cape trailed behind her like a queen's mantle. When Dominic saw her, his hardened mask shattered completely. He stepped forward, unable to wait. "You are a vision," he whispered hoarsely when she reached him. "I know," Clara whispered back, a triumphant twinkle in her eye. "But you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to deserve it." When it came time for vows, Dominic spoke from the heart. "I spent my life building walls out of fear and control. Then you walked in. You didn't just break down my walls, Clara. You demanded a better room. You taught me that real power isn't about the fear you cause, but the love you're brave enough to protect. I am yours, completely and forever." Clara felt a tear slip down her cheek. "You asked me to play a part, Dominic, but you never asked me to hide who I was. You gave me the stage, and you let me shine. I promised to be your partner, your equal, and the woman who will always spot the danger hiding in plain sight." When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Dominic pulled her into a kiss that brought the entire room, hardened criminals and theater people alike, to their feet in a thunderous standing ovation. The fake wife had not just stolen the show. She had rewritten the entire script, and this was a story that would never close.